the Female Relief Society of Nauvoo functioned on and off, 1842, 43, 44. But in 1845, the Relief Society was ceased, or it was stayed, or was not allowed to meet for a time. Well, why? It happens directly after Joseph Smith's death. What goes on? Well, one of the things that seems to happen is that by 1844, Emma Smith wants to put a stop or put a halt to the private practice of plural marriage. In a later video, I'll talk about plural marriage that was being practiced in Nauvoo. But in summary, understand that 99% of the church did not know that plural marriage was happening. Plural marriage was only introduced to a select few people in private in Nauvoo. It was not taught openly until the church started to come westward and became established here in Utah. So Emma Smith, with a lot of the women in the Relief Society, would not have known that plural marriage was happening. Some of the women did know, obviously people like Eliza R. Snow and others who had been married in plural marriages. Some, too, the prophet Joseph Smith knew what was happening. But in 1844, Emma seems to say, let's put a stop to this as a whole. She mounts a direct effort to oppose plural marriage using her position as Relief Society president. In March of 1844, there's 4 meetings that are held, and in each of those meetings, Emma Smith has this thing called the Voice of Innocence that I'll tell you about, read and talked about. She makes some pretty bold statements. She says things like, if there ever was any authority on the earth, she had it, Emma Smith does, and that what she said to the Relief Society was law for the women. She's the president of the women. Well, she has this document that was written by W.W. Phelps called the Voice of Innocence, read and ratified. The Voice of Innocence basically defends the virtue and extols and promotes the virtue of women, of chastity within the church, saying that they are moral women, they are righteous women, they're virtuous women, and that they abhor and that they reject any form of immorality, such as prostitution or fornication or adultery or polygamy as a whole. Now, that's difficult because some of the women in the room were in plural marriages as this Voice of Innocence document is being read. The book, The First 50 Years of Relief Society from the Church Historians Press, says, quote, clearly Emma Smith tried to win women's full support for putting down iniquity, and she seemed to have mounted an intensified effort at what she considered moral reform, with the intent to halt all plural marriage, including the practice authorized by her husband. According to a later reminiscence of John Taylor said, quote, Sister Emma made use of the position that she held to try to pervert the minds of the sisters, and taught the sisters that the practice of celestial marriage or plural marriage, as taught and practiced by Joseph Smith the prophet, was not of God. One of the problems is after the March 1844 Voice of Innocence document comes out, there seems to be a hint of hypocrisy in it because some of the men of Nauvoo who also oppose plural marriage, they know that Joseph Smith and some of these women have entered into plural marriage practices. So then you have these public denials by Joseph or these public documents rejecting it. And it seems to mount or add to the mounting fury that's coming against the prophet in the spring of 1844 by certain dissenters from the church. Joseph Smith blamed the Voice of Innocence document for some of this opposition against him. He said, quote, he never had any fuss with these men, those who were opposing him and calling him a fallen prophet, until that Female Relief Society brought out that paper against adulterers and adulteresses. Now, that might be a little unfair on Joseph's part. Joseph had a lot of problem with some of these dissenters long before the Voice of Innocence document came out, but it did seem to contribute to the problems as a whole.